Welcome to First Issues. Botswana boasts of shining examples of environmental protection. It has reserved a staggering 37% of its land for national parks and reserves, according to the Hospitality and Tourism Association of Botswana, HATAB, which are further protected by its high-value, low-volume tourism policy, which sees a low number of tourists paying top dollar to preserve the ecological integrity of our pristine natural wonders. However, beyond ecotourism, the buzzword within the international community is now sustainable tourism. Beyond a tourism sector that respects and cares for just the physical environment, stakeholders from different parts of the world said the tourism that they want is one that has inclusive and sustainable economic growth, social inclusiveness, employment and poverty reduction, cultural values, diversity and heritage, mutual understanding, peace and security. People want to see this billion-dollar industry directly uplift the lives of the peoples and places that travelers visit. There is a growing international community of people who will no longer tolerate scenes of abject poverty that exist right next to excess and luxury that have characterized some attractions within this industry. This is sure to resonate strongly with the multitudes of Botswana who view the industry as one in which white and foreign nationals own prime land and concessions, in which the millions of dollars made are said to leak back to these owners' countries of origin and not circulate within the economy of Botswana, in which the government of Botswana is said to be cheated of proceeds it could make from tax, in which citizens are viewed as having been priced out of the most iconic places within their own country, and where the communities in these areas are considered to remain mere onlookers, left to fight over crumbs in the form of menial jobs to this day. We can accept that the expertise and understanding of world-class travel has not always been a skill set of Botswana. But decades on, these perceived inequalities are breeding discontent. As a leader in the other tenets of sustainable tourism, we took our questions to the CEO of Chobe Holdings, Jonathan Gibson. In response, he said these pervasive negative sentiments are not wholly based on truth, that they are somewhat hurtful, and that they can be easily laid to rest.
You know, this is a perception that's been here ever since I've been in the tourist industry, starting from 1983. And I'm sad to say that perception hasn't gone away. The perception is still there. I can't speak for the industry as a whole because there's no yardstick, there's no industry yardstick or anything like that. But I can say this from a Chobe Holdings perspective. Every single cent of revenue that we've earned within Botswana, we've taken in Botswana. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And to this end, I've often suggested to government that the solutions are very easy about the revenue question. All what the government has to do is to say a condition of your lease is you have to be formally audited by a reputable firm of auditors. Those auditors have got to comment specifically on two items. One, that all the revenue that you earned has been taken in Botswana, and B, you've paid your taxes. And in that way, we could get rid of the problem overnight, basically, and I'd love to see that done. I cannot understand why we haven't done it to date. We also, in Chobe Holdings, as a public company, produce what we call a value-added statement. This is on our annual financial statements, but as a public company, as you know, it's a public document. It's also on our website. And that value-added statement tells us we've earned so much revenue, we've had so much expenditure within Botswana. The residue has gone to four sources, basically. It's gone to staff wages and benefits. It's gone to paying government taxations and other imposts. it's gone to shareholders in the form of dividend, and it's the money we've retained within the country to provide funding for future expansion. And the figures are very telling. Of that fund, so to speak, of those residue funds basically, government takes 32% in form of corporate taxation, lease fees, other taxes, etc., etc., etc. Shareholders get 18% in the form of dividends. In other words, government's draw is far greater than the shareholders that have actually funded the business at the end of the day. 25% approximately goes to staff wages and bonuses, and another 25% gets retained in company funds within Botswana to fund future development. And so, this is a perception I feel we can deal with very easily, and I find it very frustrating, quite frankly, that we haven't dealt with it. The other thing is, it's talked about often, is that the industry is expatriate owned basically, it's foreign owned, and this adds to the perceptions basically at the end of the day. From a Chobe Holdings perspective, what we've done is that we introduced very early on in the 80s citizen shareholders basically, who came in as investors when we started the lodge and that sort of thing. We had those citizen shareholders. And then finally in 1999 we listed on the Botswana Stock Exchange, that brought in many, many more shareholders, and those were the vast majority of those shareholders were citizens. If you ask me today exactly what the percentage of citizen shareholding in Chobe Holdings is, it's a difficult question to answer because shareholders aren't required to declare their nationality when they purchase shares. So it's actually quite a difficult number to put a hat on. But I can tell you more than half of the company is certainly owned by citizens at the end of the day.
What is the future of help? It's to help people find the great in themselves. The drive, the passion. Help them find their true potential. Help them stretch. Help them grow. That's why we help people help themselves, help the world, because a little help goes a long, long way. FNB, how can we help you?
Many peoples around the world are voicing growing discontent over not benefiting significantly from proceeds from the natural resources found in their own countries, particularly in tourism. This sector has not been immune to such grumblings locally.
A group such as Chobe Holdings has many, many expenses, which are your day-to-day running expenses of the company. Then the question is, what have you done with the funds left over from that? Well, we've paid our staff. They take about 25% of that funding, as I suggested. We pay government taxes and imposts, lease fees, licensing fees, and that comes to about 32% of the figure. So government take is almost twice what the shareholders get at the end of the day. Then, of course, what we've got to do is retain funds within the company to provide future finance for expansion opportunities, etc., etc. And that's about 25% of that residue gets maintained by the company within the country to meet that future expansion expenditure.
You did say there's no yardstick for us to determine whether the perception has its basis in truth or not. It's hard to get a clear picture of what is happening in the tourism industry. In your view, though, how much leakage do you assume or do you suspect is happening?
The industry at times hasn't been profitable, so there's been no excess funds to put anywhere else, basically. And we've had an occasion where we've had to bring externally funds in to meet expenditure when we've been hard pressed, and that has happened to us, and I'm sure it's happened to everybody else in the industry. From my perspective, I came from South Africa then. The tax rate was 40%. The tax rate in Botswana is a little more than half of that. There's no point in me externalizing funds to South Africa into a tax regime like that. I'm happy to be in Botswana. We're happy to be in Botswana, and we would rather retain our funds within Botswana. So I certainly believe that in the vast majority of the cases, that is probably the situation. Botswana is a great country. We don't have exchange control regulations. If you maintain funds in Botswana, you can send them overseas if you want to. But, there's no real point in doing it. So I think it's exaggerated. I think it's a perception. But I think there are ways of dealing with that perception. And that's what I'd like to see the industry overcome.
If there is any form of leakage, how would it happen? At which point within the transactions?
Let's say you're an American. You know nothing about Africa, but you've decided as a couple you want to come out to Africa on a safari. It's very difficult just to book a safari. Traditionally, you'd have gone to your travel agent, who would have recommended an outgoing tour operator, who would put together a brochure for you, who might use an incoming tour operator in Southern Africa, very often in South Africa, and then finally the client comes to you. So from a lodge operator perspective, our financial arrangements are not with the individual who's traveling to us, but the tour operator who we've billed at the end of the day. Now, if we were also lodge operators and also tour operators, we could simply take some of those funds that were paid and pay them overseas. It would be a relatively easy thing to do. It's not a difficult thing to do. It can be done relatively easily. We ourselves are not tour operators, so we don't have that sort of relationship with anybody, and we don't see any need to have it. But it is possible to do, and that I think the industry must acknowledge, that only a percentage anyway of the revenue comes into the country, because the way it's worked, we charge a net rate to that tour operator. The client has paid a full rate, and funds have been retained there anyway, overseas probably. And that percentage can vary from 25% of our recommended selling price sometimes to up to 30%. Depends how good the tour operator is and how much business the tour operator generates. So that's his payment for doing that work for us, basically, at the end of the day. And sometimes, as I say, it's split between the travel agent who originally brought the business, the outgoing tour operator, and the incoming tour operator. So it is possible. It certainly is possible, but I don't think it happens nearly as much as people say it does.
How harmful would you say this negative perception or the ideas circulating around the industry has been to tourism in Botswana?
I personally have found it very disturbing, because I don't want to be in a country where the population feels that somehow my business is cheating the country at the end of the day. I just don't want that. And that's why we've now always sought to operate in such a transparent manner that we can very easily prove we have brought all the funding into the country, and we don't hold funds overseas, and we've got no need to hold funds overseas. So it is something I'd like to have sorted out, quite frankly, because we stained with the same brush as everybody else, and I just don't enjoy that.
You're saying that a simple thing by government could clear this all?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. It should be a condition of every single lease that all you required is a proper audit by a firm of reputable auditors, and they must certify that you have received all your revenue inside Botswana and you've paid all the taxes due. And once that's done, you can then easily discount these stories.
Why do you feel, though, that this type of transparency that you have adopted isn't standard practice? Why should it be legislated? Why breed this air of...
You know, when you move from being a private company to a public company, you're really exposing yourself to the public. You publish your results in the newspaper. Everything is there for everybody to see. Your financials are published again in the newspaper. You have a website with all your information on it. So you really can't afford to have anything to hide. You've also got the public as shareholders. And as directors of the company, we've got a fiduciary obligation to all those shareholders to run the company as best we possibly can and in the most honest way we can run the company. So, it's just become second nature to us, and it's very easy to do. Private companies, on the other hand, might feel that for whatever reason, they don't want to disclose who their shareholders are to the general public. They don't want to be transparent. Sure, I understand that, but as I say, I believe it should be an obligation because it's not too much to disclose. And I don't think if it was a condition of a lease, anybody would refuse to actually or be in a position to refuse to accept those sort of conditions.
What are your 2 cents? Do join in on the conversation on our YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook pages. Up next, there's more to come after the break. Thank you for staying with us. Tonight marks the launch of our exciting new Business Basics segment. This one is for the aspiring as well as established entrepreneur and the small business owner. Basically, although small and medium enterprises or SMEs are generally considered to be more riskier investments by financial institutions, with more than 50% closing down within their first 3 years of operation, they are now respected as more stable contributors towards economic growth than large corporations. That is why over the coming weeks, we will bring you business basics such as testing the viability of a business idea, crafting plans that will improve your chances of getting funding, and the ways in which to keep your business sustainable. We trust that you are as excited about these freely shared nuggets of expert advice as we are in bringing them to you. And to begin, the head of business banking at FNB Botswana, Petrus Sibina, expands on some of the key learnings you should expect to get from this new segment.
First of all, I think the biggest challenge across the world is the high failure rate of SMEs. Across the globe, there's a very high failure rate of SMEs. It is projected that within the first 3 years, all SMEs 50% of SMEs would actually folded. Within 5 years, almost 60%, 70% would have folded. And so the financial institutions are more skeptical now to extend lending to the SMEs without thorough planning. And so if they were to give you money, they want justification that indeed you have really done a deep dive in terms of what will become the best of tomorrow. So they want that to be convinced before they can lend money. But on the other side as well, it has also emerged that there is the lack of planning has actually brought these control issues within SMEs. They don't have control of their businesses because there's no reference point where they can actually refer to really say, are we still on the plan? Are we doing as well our initial plan? And even if a consultant comes, there is no reference point where they can actually guide to really say, this is how far you are away from the plan, this is what you need to do to get back. So it's essential, one, as a tool to request for funding, secondly, as a management tool, because from time to time, it becomes your roadmap as an entrepreneur. You refer to it to check if you're on course. If you're away from the plan, you check the variation, and then you get back to plan. So it's essential for both the SME operator as well as for the bank for that reasons. I'd like to emphasize that you don't just need a plan for you to go to the bank. You need a plan as your compass. It really guides your direction. It informs you how you allocate your resources. It informs your decisions. So it's very important that you have it. Otherwise, if you don't have a plan, any road will actually lead you there and you'll never know when you have arrived. One might ask, who really needs a business plan? Is it a startup? Is it an existing business? But I would say any type of business requires a business plan. If you're a startup, in fact, you need a good plan to convince someone to first put the money in. If you're an existing business, you just need to reinvent, to relook at how you've been doing things, where you're going, and so you need a business plan. The other thing that I need to mention is that a business plan becomes a living document because your conditions, when you project, you're taking a view into the future. But as and when you get into now implementation, some things might not be the same as you had projected. Some of the assumptions might change. So on a periodic basis, It could be annually, it could be biannually. You might need to go back and check and really say, is the business plan still relevant? Do we need to change? Are our assumptions still the same as from the beginning, or do we need to adjust? So it becomes a document that you need to refer to and update continuously. First of all, a business plan has to be concise and consistent. It has to flow. When I read it, I need to really get the understanding that you really understand what you're saying. It has to be your conversation shouldn't be all over the place. It has to be consistent and convincing. So your facts have to add together. At the end of the day, I really need to really say, no, there's a good business to invest in. So sometimes you might have good business plan, good facts that are mixed up, and though they don't flow. So at the end of the day, you don't really conclude. At the conclusion, I don't really get to know whether I should make an investment or not. So your business plan has to flow, has to be consistent, has to be concise. Some people would think a business plan has to be 1,200 pages. No one can actually read those documents. In fact, there is a component within the business plan that is called the executive summary. That is actually your selling space. Within that 1-pager or 2-pager, I will either get the motivation to read further into your plan or to stop. So you have to compress it within those 2 pages, 1 page, to motivate the financier or any potential investor or anyone that you would like to sell a stake into your business to read further. If you fail to do that, they won't go through the rest of the documents.
Beginning today, we teach you the investment opportunities offered by the equities market, beginning with an overview of the Botswana Stock Exchange.
The history of the Botswana Stock Exchange can be traced to 1989, when the organization was known as the Botswana Share Market. At the time, there were only 5 listed companies and 1 stockbroking firm. The exchange has evolved a lot. We currently list stocks, also known as equities. We list bonds, and we also list exchange-traded funds. We currently have 34 companies listed on the equity side. That includes both domestic and foreign companies. We have 42 bonds. We have 4 exchange-traded funds. If you look at the members of the exchange, they have grown from 1 in 1989, when the company was known as the BSM, to 4 companies that do sell and trade on behalf of the investors. Technology is at the core of the activities of stock exchanges around the world, and the BSE is not different. In 2012, the automated trading system was introduced in order to allow the BSE to be able to execute large trades, and that can also be evidenced from the increase in turnover over the years. In 2008, the BSE also introduced another system, the CSDB, which is for clearing and settlement, and is currently housed under the CSDB, which is a subsidiary of the Botswana Stock Exchange.